Hello guys, welcome back to Living Rock channel. So today we're going to have quite a difficult topic. We're gonna talk about a little bit of inflation and also the inflation that taken place in the world history. Because we know today we're facing one of the biggest inflation crisis perhaps in 30 years of U.S. history. We're seeing inflation all the way spiked to 6.8%, which is one of the highest number around 30 years since 1970. So during 1970s, U.S. the entire inflation rate has gone to nearly more than 10% inflation, which is very very toxic, and it's very difficult situation. And the ex-Federal Reserve Chairman, Mr. Paul Volcker, he basically had to do a lot of contraction policy. He has to raise interest rate very aggressively in order to stop the inflation from going up. So we are facing the very similar situation compared to 1970s. And my opinion is that I've been saying this repeatedly during my last YouTube video, and I was talking about how I view this inflation is going up and it's going to be consistent, and it's also not going to be transitory, which was against the present Federal Reserve Chairman, Mr. Powell's his original statement of the inflation, right? So basically, if we actually look back to maybe 2 months ago, there were a lot of articles been saying, "Oh, just don't worry about inflation. Just don't worry about all these numbers." And after these vaccinations, that everything will be fine. That we were repeatedly hearing all these kind of voices, but none of these were true. And right now, we're seeing Mr. Powell changing his tone on inflation and changing his perception on inflation, because he knows that this inflation is devastating, and it's also going to hurt the global economy, and it's going to create worse influence if Federal Reserve doesn't plan, if the Federal Reserve is not going to have a rate hike next year during 2022. So that means if the Federal Reserve doesn't want to resolve the hyperinflation, the inflation issue right now by raising interest rate, we're going to have a bigger problem next year. So we're going to look at some of the example of the great inflation crisis during the 1970s, and we're trying to read some articles just to understand what really happened. So I'm going to go through that very quickly, so you guys can understand what truly happened in 1970s, and hopefully we'll be able to extract some knowledge from all these events, and we'll be able to use all these events and to improve our decision-making skills and also the quality of our investments. Okay, so if we look at what happened in 1965 to 1982, we're going to see some really big problem in the financial market. So in 1964, inflation was measured a little more than 1% per year, and then the rate has been climbing up quickly during that 6 years. Okay, so inflation began ratcheting upward in the mid 1960s and reached for more than 14% in 1980. Eventually declined to average only 3.5% in the latter half of the 1980s. So what the economic system was facing is the entire United States was facing a leveraging crisis. Basically mean the U.S. economy was overheating, and we also, like the United States back then, were also facing with the energy crisis as well. So we're going to see that inflation, along with the energy price and also the commodity price, all these factors are driving up all the inflations. We're talking about commodities, we're talking about all these costs, we're talking about real estate market. So everything we're going to use, from food staple, from everything, from the energy, we were suffering through this inflation. And Paul Volcker basically has to do something in order to help the economic system to recover. Okay, so one of the reasons why U.S. was facing this kind of problem was because there was a collapse of Bretton Woods. But this is going to be quite difficult, and it's going to make this video very long. So I'm just going to quickly extract the bullet points from the collapse of Bretton Woods, so you understand the connection between the Bretton Woods and what really happened in 1970s. So basically is because the U.S. dollar was, basically unpacked with gold. And Nixon, during the summer of 1971, President Nixon halted the exchange of dollar for gold by foreign central banks, basically a little bit of like a default. So that is bringing an impact to the dollar system and also the global monetary system. And then the whole world is going through a very short-lived Smithsonian agreement, which is a world currency system, but that quickly broke down. And then we're now in a Jamaican system. Okay, so the economic system, the financial order was very fragile by the time. So you have a lot of problems that were embedded in the financial system. We're talking about physical imbalances. We're talking about energy shortages. We're also talking about these bad employment data. Okay, so we were having a lot of issues. Right now we have COVID outbreak, we have pandemic, and we have all these QE infinity. We have financial crisis, and we haven't been able to actually recover from financial crisis because what we were doing is the central bank kept printing money and inject all this liquidity to the financial system. So the equity market, along with other real house, like properties, prices are going up, and by doing that, they are buying all these toxic assets. They are putting all these free money, inject this money to the system. That's how we were able to, I would just say, easing those kind of the impact from what truly happened during 2008. The crisis did not end. All right. So in fact, the crisis was kind of like easing out because the liquidity was everywhere. Okay. So we were facing a little bit similarity compared to 1970s, because back then the U.S. system was having a little bit of a challenge. Okay, so we were facing a lot of, for example, like Arab oil embargo that began in October 1973 and lasted about 5 months. So you have a lot of things happen. Okay, so that was what really happened, and some of the key factors that's driving the U.S. economic system from having these, inflation, or could be a hyperinflation economy, obstacles. And a lot of economists, people we're talking about experts, we're talking about, these economists, they did not forecast these inflation crises from coming. So Federal Reserve, the ex-Federal Reserve chairman stood out and say, hey, I'm going to do something. Otherwise, this inflation crisis is going to destroy the American economy. So therefore, he kind of used a very stringent policy. He limited the banks. He controls the bank from speculating. He limits the bank from having too much power, because basically investment bank could use a lot of money from people. We are talking about ordinary people. Investment banks are able and capable of using their own saving money and to buy all these financial assets, and also they're capable of using the government money. So these financial institutions quickly become the source of the leveraging, because this happened again and again in our history, that if you create wealth, you create currency, and all these money will go around, right? And the financial institutions, along with bankers, they'd be able to use all this free money and cheap liquidity. They can speculate in the financial system, which will drive all these asset prices from going higher. And the ordinary people are going to suffer, because they're going to find out everything, basically everything price would be, inflating. They will have very expensive food, very expensive rent. They will have very expensive, commodity price. The companies, we talk about small and middle enterprise, they will have higher production costs, and all these wealth created would go to real estate development. It would go to investment bank, financial services, because these guys are playing around with money. So Paul Volcker was giving I could say a very, very strong limit to put an end of this speculation. So what happened now is, from my perspective, I still haven't seen at any point Powell was doing the same thing. Okay, so I'm not seeing like a very strong posture or any strong indicators from White House, from Joe Biden, saying, hey, we're going to put a stop of this speculation. We are going to put an end. We're going to put some limit into these financial institutions. We're going to stop them from creating more and more leveraging. On the other hand, we're seeing a really big budget published by the White House. They're trying to have a massive, construction plan, but that is not going to really be helpful to the economic system, right? So basically, what you're trying to do is you're going to postpone what's going to happen next. So this is what is happening now. We're seeing the similar crisis, but we're not seeing the similar hero, right? We're not seeing Powell standing up just like Paul Volcker. So my take is that if by the end of next year, if Powell is not doing anything to limit the speculation, to even try to explode that kind of real estate bubble, to let that kind of bubble ease a little bit, the American economic system is going to have more fragility, and it's going to be more volatile, and perhaps we're facing a global scale financial crisis that could happen. So this is my take on the recent inflation crisis, because from the experience of 1970s, if you have an overheating economic system, and at the same time, if you don't want to do anything to stop the asset bubble from inflating and to raise interest rate, to limit those speculators, you're going to have some serious problem in the economic system sooner or later. So the government should do something very quickly, because the bomb is basically ticking right now. So thank you guys for listening. I know this episode could be quite difficult to understand. It could be kind of tedious, but if you know what I'm saying, that all of my thoughts are actually I'm not like making these up. So it's all out of logic, out of solid proof, and we can actually see that from a history point of view. So thank you guys for watching. I'm going to see you in the next episode. Please subscribe and give me a like if you like the content. Okay, thank you guys. See you next time.